All right, so chapter 4, section 2, standard form of a quadratic. I want to remind you really quick of what the vertex form looked like. This was vertex form of a quadratic function. This is what we did last time. Y equals to a times x minus h squared plus k. And this is Friday's notes, so don't worry about taking these down. But this is what we did last time, okay? And then we talked about finding the vertex, which was hk, right? And to find the axis of symmetry, we went all the way down here. Where was that definition here? The axis of symmetry was right here. X equals to negative b over 2a. If you had it in standard form, and then x equal to h if you had it in vertex form. And we use the bottom one, right? Today we're going to actually use the top one, because they're going to want us to go over the standard form one. Okay? So again, we did the easier stuff, the x equals to h portion of it. Okay? And that was on Friday. Today we're going to work more on the x equals to negative b over 2a portion. Okay, so there's going to be a lot of little new things we're going to do for today's lesson. But let's start off with the actual standard form here. So the standard form is y equal to ax squared plus bx plus c. That's the standard form. Okay? So before we were using y equal to a times the quantity x minus h squared plus k. Right now we're going to be talking about the other form, which is ax squared plus bx plus c. All right. Now our a is still the amplitude of the function, okay? But a couple things that you kind of have to know about this, okay? So a, this is amplitude. Okay, remember how I called it first slope last time? It still works that way. All right, so when we're trying to graph these things, you can still use that as your first slope. Okay, C is your y-intercept. In other words, this is where it crosses the y-axis. Okay, so you automatically have 1 point when you're graphing these things most of the time. Just look at your very last number. That's going to tell you where to put a point on the y-axis. That is if the graph is big enough to show it. But we'll kind of try that out a little later. But that's going to be your y-intercept. Okay? So A is our amplitude. C is our y-intercept. Notice there's no h, no k. In other words, I don't know which way to move it, left, right, up, down, because that information isn't given to me. Okay? But I could find my axis of symmetry. Okay, so I could find the axis of symmetry, which is x equal to negative b over 2a. And that'll help me find my vertex. Now, remember, my vertex was h comma k before, right? That's what it was, h comma k. So for me, that's not the case anymore. My vertex is, it's going to look really complicated, but it's not that bad. It's your axis of symmetry. You plug it in and you solve for y. All right, so your axis of symmetry will be your x value. And then when you plug in your axis of symmetry into the equation, you solve for y and it gives you your vertex. Now, this is the only part of doing these problems, a vertex, that can get really annoying. It can get kind of long, okay? So I understand that the vertex is a bit of a hassle, all right? But it is done using this method. You're going to find your axis of symmetry first. Once you find your axis of symmetry, then you got to find your y value. The good news is most of the time when you're having to graph these things, you got to find your axis of symmetry, and then you got to find your vertex anyway. So it's not like you're doing extra work, but it's a lot harder than just x equal h, right? That's what the old one was. So, all right. So we have an equation in standard form, okay, y equal to ax squared plus bx plus c, okay? And then we have our amplitude, we have our y-intercept, so that's kind of new. We didn't have that before. So now we have our y-intercept, that's the c value. Our axis of symmetry is x equal to negative b over 2a. And our vertex is the axis of symmetry, comma, your y value. Okay? So, real quick note, just in terms of your a value. So let me put that right here. If A is positive, the parabola opens up. Okay, so it opens this way. So if A is positive, it opens up. So if A is negative, it's going to open down. So let me write that down. If A is negative, the parabola opens down. So negative A opens down. Now remember, we talked about this on Friday. If it opens up, my vertex is a minimum, right? Like my point would be down here, right? That's my vertex, so it would be a minimum point. If it opens down, then my vertex would be at the top, so it would be a maximum point. Okay? So just remember that opening up means minimum vertex, opening down means maximum vertex. That's from Friday. Just want to remind you guys about that. So let me go over some of these types of questions they're going to make you do. Some of these are really fast, okay? And then some will take a little bit longer. So here's example number 1. Which direction does the parabola open? Whoops, parabola. So which direction does the parabola open? So we go negative 2x squared plus 3x minus 5. That'll be A. I'll put B right next to it here. Y equals to half x squared minus 6. You might notice my B value disappeared for part B. Okay, I don't have a BX there, like a 6x or a 3x, something like that. My x term to the first is gone. That's okay. That just means B equals 0. So what do you think for part A? Does it open up or down? Down, right? Because my A term is negative, right? So since A is negative, opens down. I'm just putting that there for note purposes. What about part B? Opens up or down? It's a half. So is that positive or negative? It's positive, right? So A is positive, so it opens up. Right? So since A is positive, it opens up. So you do have like questions like that on your homework. Okay? So not too hard to do. Here's another set that's not too hard to do. So example number 2. Name the y-intercept. In other words, like what is the y-intercept for this set of problems here? In part B, we'll do y equals to 0.7x squared minus 0.5x minus, 2/3. It doesn't matter what numbers I use, really. It's just, it matters where you're looking. So what would the y-intercept be for part A? Yeah, 2, right? It's going to be 2. It's always that number at the very end without a letter. If it's there. If it's not there, then it's a 0. Okay? So if all I had was like negative 3x squared plus 6x, and that was it, and there was no like plus 2 or minus 3, then it would be a 0. But in this case, my y-intercept is 2. That means I'm going to go to the y-axis at 2 and put a dot right there. What about for part B? What's my y-intercept there? Negative 2/3. Good, so there you go. So that's pretty easy. So you would just go to your y-intercept or your y-axis and go to negative 2/3 and put a dot right there and you're done. Okay? So far so good, not too bad, right? Pretty easy. We're going to find axis of symmetry next, which takes a little bit of work, not a lot, but then after that it's vertex, and that takes some work. So let's do example number 3. Find the axis of symmetry. Okay, so find the axis of symmetry. We'll do 2 of them again. Remember, the axis of symmetry is an invisible vertical line that cuts the parabola perfectly in half. Okay, that's what it is. So it's called the axis of symmetry, because when you cut the parabola in half, it's symmetric on both sides. It looks exactly the same, right? So that's why they call it the axis of symmetry. I think we discussed that last time. So there's a formula for this. X is equal to negative b over 2 times a. What is my b value for the first one? Well, not negative 6x, but just negative 6, right? Don't use a letter, but use a number. Divided by 2 times, what's a? 2, right? Yeah, it's 2. Right? Remember, this is your a, your b, and your c. Right? So now all you got to do is work that out. So we got x equal to 6 over 4, which would be 3/2. That's your x value. Okay? That's your x value for your axis of symmetry. So if you were to draw a vertical line at 3/2, that would be like where the graph is split in half. Okay? Now remember, we're going to use that to find our vertex if they wanted to. Okay, you would use that x value. I don't like the fact that it came out as a fraction, but I mean, you have calculators, you can plug them in, and there you go. Let's do the next one really quick, part B. So x equals to negative b over 2 times a. So what's my b value? 8, thank you. Over 2 times a. What's a? A 1. Yeah, if you don't see it, you want to put a 1 there, right? So this is x equal to negative 8 over 2, which is negative 4. And there you go. So there's your axis of symmetry. Okay? So the hardest part about doing work with quadratic functions in standard form is when they ask you to find the vertex. Okay? That's usually the hardest part, because you're going to have to do what we just did right now, and then you're going to plug it into the equation and solve for y. All right? Not that that's extremely hard, but like if you want to say like, oh, all these problems were pretty easy, but the hardest problems were, it's always the vertex. Always trying to find the vertex. So let me help you with one of those or 2 of those. But before I do that, does anybody have any questions on the direction that it opens? Okay, or on the y-intercept, where it crosses the y-axis? No? What about the axis of symmetry? Just labeling, right? B and your A, just find your B and your A, and you should be good. All right? So, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of do a 2-part problem right now. We're going to find the vertex, but then I want us to graph it. Okay? That way we can do like the whole problem. So Example number 4. Now, on your homework, this is what it's going to ask you. Let me write it down. It's going to be kind of long. So it's going to ask you a couple things. Identify, at least the last 4 problems, shall I say. Identify A, B, and C. That should be pretty easy. Find the axis of symmetry the vertex, the direction, in other words, which direction is it opening, and y-intercept. Okay, and then I'm going to add one thing. Graph. Because on your test, we're not going to ask you to do all of this. We're just going to say, can you graph it? But in order to graph it, you got to be able to figure out what is your ABC value. How do you find your axis of symmetry? What's my vertex? Which does it open? What's my y-intercept? Put all that stuff in there. Then you can graph it. Okay? So we're going to do 2 examples like this. Kind of lengthy. Okay? And then we're done. So let me start off with the first one here. Hold on, let me think of something here. Now let me put a +2 here. I hope that'll work nicely. All right, so first thing, for this problem, they say identify A, B, and C. So I'm going to put A, B, and C. What's my A value? Not X. 1, right? What's my B value? -4. What's my C value? 2, right? There we go. We got our A, B, and C. All right? So that's what they want us to do first. All right? Second, find the axis of symmetry. So, all right, axis of symmetry, x equals to -b over 2a. Well, my b value is -4, so it's negative of a -4 over 2 times a, which is 1. So x is equal to 4 over 2. So x is equal to 2. Right? After my axis of symmetry, they said, find your vertex. So here we go, finding my vertex. I know x is 2 because that's my axis of symmetry, right? The vertex is the axis of symmetry, comma, y, right? So my axis of symmetry is 2, so I'm going to use that for my vertex. Now let me plug it into my equation. So y is equal to 2 squared minus 4 times 2 plus 2. I plugged it into my equation. Y is equal to 4 minus 8 plus 2. 4 minus 8 is -4, and -4 plus 2 is a -2. So here is my vertex. 2, -2. Okay? 2, -2. So before I move on, are we okay with the ABC values, the axis of symmetry portion, finding the vertex? Any questions on that? A lot of this is just kind of busy work, right? Now, after they said that, they wanted 2 more things. What direction does it open? And what is my y-intercept? Okay? So here we go. Which direction does it open? Say it again. Well, what's my A term? Is A positive or negative? Positive, so it opens up, right? So it opens up, and then the last thing is going to be my y-intercept. What's my y-intercept? According to my equation. Remember, it's my c value, right? It's my c value. So what's my c value? 2. All right, now that I have all this stuff, now I get to graph it. So you see what I mean by this is a lot of busy work, right? There's a lot of work that we have to kind of be aware of. So I'm going to go ahead and draw a graph here. I'll try to see if I can fit it in on the side here so we can keep all this information there. I'm hoping that's good enough. Actually should be, but we'll see. 1, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4. Do you guys remember, according to last Friday's homework, what's the first thing I always graphed on this? You guys remember? The very first thing we graphed. It was 1 point. It's always going to be our vertex. Okay? So my vertex is 2, negative 2. So 2, negative 2. All right. Now, you should also notice that I do have my y-intercept, right? My y-intercept is 2. So there it is. What was my axis of symmetry? It was x equal to 2, right? So I'm going to go to x equal to 2, and I'm going to draw this is supposed to be an invisible line, but we have to actually draw it so we can see it. Now, the reason why I do that is because you see how I have that point in blue on the left side? How many spaces is it away from that axis of symmetry? 2. So I'm going to go to the other side 2 spaces away and put another dot. Because this is symmetric, right? That means the left side looks the same as the right side. The right side looks the same as the left side. Well, remember all we needed is 3 points? So here you go. Here's your graph. We're done. That's a lot of work. It was a lot easier on Friday, right? On Friday, you just had to put your vertex. You got your A term. You moved your slope, right? Kind of. And then you were done. Here, you want to utilize your axis of symmetry. Okay? If you cannot utilize your axis of symmetry, then utilize your slope. So I want you guys to notice my slope is A equal to 1, right? That means 1 up, 1 over. Check this out. If I go 1 up, 1 over, here's a point right there in black, and 1 up, 1 over, here's the other one. Notice how I went right through it? You could have used your A value as well to find your slopes, right? Your first slope, and then drawn your picture from there. But since we know the y-intercept, it might be an easier way to find your other point without having to do extra work, okay? But you can use your A term, you can use your y-intercepts to do these graphs. So, I mean, you could see this took a lot of work. A, B, and C listed. They wanted us to list A, B, and C because it helps us with our axis of symmetry. It also helps us with our y-intercept. And that tells us our vertex, once we get our axis of symmetry, and our direction that it opens, that's based on our A term. Okay? So we're going to do one more like this. You guys have, just so you know, on your homework, you don't have any problems that make you graph. But you do have 4 problems that make you do all this work. Okay? So all you would have to do left is just graph it. Okay? On your quiz, they're not going to ask you to do all of this, but they're going to tell you graph it. And you have to kind of do all of this to graph it. All right? So we'll discuss it when it's time for us to review, which is going to be tomorrow. So let's do one more. And we'll do one from your homework, because so far we haven't done any of your homework problems, because most of these have been pretty easy. But let's go through one of your homework problems. So this is part B. we'll do y equal to x squared plus 2x minus 3. So we're going to do all the process and then we're done. So first thing they said is to list your ABCs. So let's go A, B, and C. What's my A term? 1. What's my B term? 2. What's my C term? -3. All right, got the ABCs. Now let's find our axis of symmetry. -b over 2a. So negative, I saw b was 2 over 2 times a is 1, right? I know those numbers because I just listed them. So this is -2 over 2. This comes out to -1. So there's my axis of symmetry, -1. Next, find your vertex. Now your vertex is a point. We already know the x value. Oops, -1, sorry. We know it's a -1. So now I just got to plug it into my equation and figure out what the y value is. So y is equal to -1 squared plus 2 times -1 minus 3. Just start working through it slowly. So -1 squared is 1. 2 times -1 is -2 minus 3. Well, 1 minus 2 minus 3, that's -4. So -1, -4. There's my vertex. Remember, that's my starting point. The next thing they wanted to know was the direction that it was opening. Which direction does this open? Up, right? Because A is positive. So we're going to put up. And then they wanted to know my y-intercept. What's my y-intercept? -3. All right. I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to try to graph it right here on the side. But on your homework, you're done at this point, okay? On your homework, you're finished. You don't have to do anything else. Let me make it a little bit bigger here. Like I said, the graphing, I kind of just want to get a little bit of practice on it because you are going to have to do this on your test. I'm going to ask you to graph them when they're in standard form. So you have to go through this whole process. So I figure let's kind of get you ready for that, even though it's not part of your homework. But I'd rather you practice it a couple times today. We'll do it tomorrow again. That way when you see it on your quiz on Wednesday, which by the way, your quiz is on Wednesday. We're going back to quizzes again, right? You'll be able to do it. Okay, so first thing we graph, well, at least first thing I like to graph is my vertex, okay? -1, -4. So let me go to -1, -4. That's right here. That's my vertex. Then I want to graph my y-intercept. Well, my y-intercept is -3 on the y-axis, so that's right here. So it's real close. Then I want to draw my axis of symmetry, which is -1. X equals -1, so I'm going to draw an invisible vertical line, right? I know it's very visible, but it's supposed to be invisible. All right, and now you're going to utilize your y-intercept. How many spaces away is the y-intercept from that invisible line? 1. So let's go 1 to the other side. And now you draw your picture. And you're done. That's the purpose of your axis of symmetry, is that so you don't do as much work. You only have to do one side and then you copy it to the other side. All right, so this is what your homework is like today, with the exception of the graph at the end.